This is example 8. Sketch the curve of theta is equal to cosine of 2 theta. Okay. This is going to be a bit more intricate. So, as always, we're going to start by plotting the graph of the R and then following it around. So, let's make this pi. This is 2 pi. This is pi over 2. This is 3 pi over 2. And this is pi over 4. This is 3 pi over 4. This is, I guess, 5 pi over 4. And this is 7 pi over 4. Okay, let's plot the graph of r of theta, which is 2 cosine theta underneath here. So what's going to happen? So we are starting here at 1, and as you go from 0 to pi over 4, since you're multiplying the angle by 2, then we're actually going to go from 1 to 0 with cosine, right? So just, what is this doing? This is just multiplying theta by 2. So it's, as you range from 0 to pi, it's like inside cosine, it's like going from 0 to 2 pi. So whatever we see from 0 to 2 pi with cosine, we're going to see from 0 to pi with this particular guy, right? So we are going to go like this. Down. What a bad start. Down. And then like this. And then like this. Here we are back at 1. Crossing 0 again. Minus 1. Crossing 0. And then at 1. Okay. That is our guy. So this here is 1. And this is minus 1. Cool. All right, convince yourself that this is true before anything else, because this is important. And then I'm going to put our axes here. Let me do a different color, perhaps. And we're going to try and do this. All right, so same advice as before. So in each little stage, plot it individually. If possible, change colors. We don't have enough colors to really do this, but let's give it a go. So let's do the part which is from 0 to pi over 4. So let's put the angle of pi over 4. The angle of pi over 4 is like this, right? And then we're going to go from radius 1 down to radius 0. So if this here is, I'm trying to make this picture big because it gets complicated. If this here is 1, then as we do this thing, this part right here, the red part, as we do this part right here, we're going to go steadily from 1, where as the angle goes towards pi over 4, the radius is decreasing. So it goes from 1, and then it's smaller and smaller radius, smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then like this, and then like this, and then we're going to hit like this, right? This will be the first part. Even label it, so let's label this, say, A. So this is A. Okay, let's do the next part. So now we're going to go from pi over 4 to 2 pi. So it's this part in blue. I hope these colors are visible to you guys. So pi over 4 to pi over 2. So here we have a problem because, well, not a problem, but here we have to pay a bit more attention because the radius is going to be negative now. And as I explained last time, I don't like to try and do two things at once. It's a recipe to make a mistake. So I'm going to first, instead of plotting r, I'm going to plot the absolute value of r. So I'm going to ignore the fact it's negative. I'm going to plot the absolute value of r, and then after I've done it, I'm going to reflect it through the origin to get actually the real thing we're looking for, which is r. So if I was just plotting the absolute value of r, so it would be the function which kind of does this, which goes up like this, then what would happen? Then as we go from pi over 4 to pi over 2, we go from 0 to 1, right? So let's plot this guy. So here is 1. Let's increase this a little bit. So here we are at 1. And what would be doing with the absolute value of r would be going something like this, right? It would be going like this, increasing, 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 increasing like this. This would be the absolute value of r of theta over this range. Strictly speaking, what I'm plotting is this, right? This would be this. You know? But we're not interested in that. We are actually interested in theta itself. So every time we have this guy, we're going to have a mirror image on the other side, right? So this guy corresponds to this. Well, let's do it slowly. This guy corresponds to this guy over here, this guy to this guy, this guy to this guy. We're reflecting across the origin throughout, this guy to this guy, this guy to this guy. So what we see is that the reflection of this shape across the origin gives us something like this. And my fear is that the blue is hard to see, so I'm going to sprinkle this with like dots of, not red, of green, say. So this guy is this guy. This is our actual guy, right? So that now that we've done this part, we don't need this anymore. Well, actually, let's just keep it. Let's just keep it. Why not? All right, so, and let's also label. So let's call this thing B. So we know that this guy here is B. That's the next thing we've done. All right, let's do the next part. So from pi over 2 to 3 pi over 4. Again, we got a negative radius. No, which color? Let's say green. Okay, so we've got a negative radius. So it's going to go from -1 down to 0. So if we plot the positive radius first, again, I don't want to do two things at once. Then as we go from pi over 2 to 3 pi over 4, then we're going to go from 1 down to 0 for the absolute value of r. So this thing here is the angle 3 pi over 4, right? And if we are plotting this guy, then we go from 1 down to 0. So it's going to look like this. Again, this is the absolute value of r, not the guy that we want. So let's do this guy right here. The picture gets crowded a little bit. All right, and now let's do the actual guy we want. So let's choose the color, the green color, right? So it's actually this thing that we want to plot. Right? And it's the mirror image of this guy. So this guy here, this is mirror image over here. This guy here has its mirror image over here. So I say mirror image, but I mean reflection through the origin. So it's not mirror in the sense of reflection through a plane, which is what you normally associate with mirror image. But as you do more maths, you'll find that there's more than one way to reflect. You can reflect through a line, and that gives you the kind of mirror image you might be more used to. You can also reflect through a point, and that is also a mirror image. And that's in some sense quite a natural one. So that's what I mean by mirror image. Okay, back to this task. So we are doing this guy, the mirror image through the origin. So as we go along here, a guy like here, this guy corresponds to this guy corresponds to this guy corresponds to this, and we've got something like this, right? The green is very visible. Let's label this thing C. So this is C right here. Cool. All right, so now we're kind of happy because we are now back in positive radii. Now I think we can get rid of this thing because we just need it as a device to deal with the negative radii. We've done that for the time being, so let's just get rid of it. Okay, so we've done C. We are now going to do 3 pi over 4 to pi. Let's change colors. Let's go back to red. There isn't any choice. So we're going to do this thing. We're going to do this thing right here. Okay? We're going to do this thing right here. And it's positive radius, so we don't have to worry about reflecting through the origin. We can just plot it. So, where are we? We are here. We are here with the angle, even though we just ended up here, we are here with the angle 3 pi over 4, and we're going to go to pi, right? So, as we're at 3 pi over 4, the radius is 0, and as we go up to pi, the radius is 1. So over here is pi, so we are going to end up here, and we're going to do something like this. Yeah, that is this part. So maybe let's just put little crosses on here. Little crosses over here. And let's label it. So this is part D, and this is part D. Okay. Cool. And I hope, again, that's visible. All right, so now we're going to do pi to 5 pi over 4. Again, we are happy because it is positive radius, so it's this part here. So we don't have to worry about reflections with the origin. It's this part here. So we start off at angle 1, and we're going to go down to 0. So here we are. This is pi, and as we go to 5 pi over 4, this here is the angle 5 pi over 4. So we're going to do this thing. Like this, right? And let's put some little circles around here, or squiggles at least, so that we identify a bit more which part we've just done, and we're going to give it a label. So we're on D, so this part must be E. E. And just because I'm fearful that you can't see it that well, let me put these green dots here. Make it a bit clearer. All right, so we're here. Now we're doing 5 pi over 4 to 3 pi over 2. And now we've got, again, negative radii. So we're not going to do this in one stage. We're going to do 2 stages. We're going to go back to considering the absolute value of r first, right? So let's do that. So this is our part right here. And we're going to consider the absolute value of r. So this is the angle 5 pi over 4, and we're going to go from 5 pi over 4 to 3 pi over 2, right, which will be like this part here. But we're going to, first of all, consider the absolute value of r. Our picture's looking indeed crowded. So if we were just considering the absolute value of r, what would it look like? So this would be this guy right here. This would be the absolute value of r, right? So if we were just doing this angle from 5 pi over 4 down to 3 pi over down to 3 over 2 pi, then we'd have angle 0, and then it increases. In other words, we'll be just sketching over this curve that we already have, right? So I don't know if I want to write over this now because it's already got something there. So let me just do this. So this thing actually is also r of theta. I'm not going to put the other part of it. It should be okay. Maybe I will. I just don't want to write nonsense. This is also this, over the range 5 pi over 4 to 3 pi over 2. So if you've never seen this stuff before, you will definitely need to watch this a number of times. This isn't that easy to begin with, but it will become easy if you do keep watching and keep trying this. Okay. So that guy is the absolute value, but we're not doing that. We're considering actually the real guy, which has got a negative value, so it's got the antipodal point. So antipodal means reflection through the origin. So this guy right here, with respect to the absolute value of r, gets reflected to this guy right here. This guy here gets reflected, this guy right here. This guy right here gets reflected to here. This guy gets reflected to here, and you can see what's happening. We're going around like this. So what we actually have, what color am I going to choose? let me choose the green color. When we do this part right here, then we are actually doing this part right here. Like this. Okay? Okay. So, this is F, and this is F right here. Okay? Cool. Now that we've done that, we don't need this thing anymore. Let's rub it off. Well, actually, it wouldn't have been bad to keep it. Too late. Okay, we're not done. So, now we do from 3 pi over 2 to 7 pi over 4. Okay, again, we've got negative radii to worry about. Let's first think about the absolute value. The absolute value would be like this, right? So the absolute value would go from 1 down to 0. So where are we? So this is 3 pi over 4, right? Over here. And down to 7 pi over 4, which is this angle right here. And if we just consider the absolute value, then it's exactly going over this part right here. So this thing is our absolute value, r of theta, comma theta, over that particular range, right? 3 pi over 2 to 7 pi over 4. Damn, closed interval, right? That guy is this guy. But again, we are with negative radii, so if we choose red here, let's do red with some orange circles. So this is the part we're interested in, and it's the reflection of this guy on the other side. So this guy corresponds to this. Well, actually, sorry, let's start right here. We're starting here because we're starting at 3 pi over 2. So this guy corresponds to this. This guy corresponds to this. This guy corresponds to this. This guy corresponds to this, reflecting through the origin. This. So we're going to curve like this. What color have we chosen? We've chosen red with orange dots. So we're doing this. We're almost there. And then orange dots. And F, G. So this is part G. So this is G. Yeah, final bit. And now we're happy because we're back in positive radii again, right? So we can get, let's keep this and give an explanation what it is. So this part is absolute value theta, as is this part right here. Cool. So this is our final part from 7 pi over 4 to 2 pi. We have positive radius. We start with radius 0 and go up to radius 1. So we ended up down here, and this is indeed the angle 7 pi over 4. So let's choose our color. Let's end with green. So this is the guy right here we're doing here. And when we are at angle 7 pi over 4, radius is 0, but then it increases, and it hits like this. FGH, so this is H right here. This is H. And that's it. Now we've done the whole part. Okay, so kind of a pretty shape we've got here from a very simple equation. And yeah, I hope you're not intimidated by this process. This is not in itself particularly difficult, right? So we just have to do it one stage at a time. We have to break it up into each of these little pieces, okay, where something happens. We go from 1 to 0, or 0 to 1, or 0 to -1, and draw each piece in turn, yeah? Just keep your head, draw each piece in turn. And when we have negative radii, my advice is that you learn to do this by first plotting positive radii and then reflecting through the origin. I've been doing this a while, and that's still how I do it. So maybe some of you can get beyond that and just do it in one stage. But if you're doing this for the first time, I would suggest you don't even try it. Do it this way. Plot the positive radii first and then reflect it through the origin to find out what the curve actually is. But most of all, don't be intimidated by this. If you've got this far, if you can sketch graphs from Cartesian coordinates, then you can also do this. It's just a different framework. Your mental muscle will develop to do this. This isn't an impossible task, and this is what you're here for. You're here to develop these new mental facilities, mental muscles to do this new kind of math. So do not give up on this. This is the final part, final important topic of the course. It definitely will be examined. So you need to maintain energy and learn this. Okay.